This video is dedicated to all the mothers and wives of the world. In the writings of the Church Fathers, one topic seems to stand out the most when it comes to women: motherhood. Motherhood is never treated as a merely biological or social function within a society, but rather it is described as an integral part of the spiritual life of a woman, due to it being a form of service to God that takes place within the intimacy of the family. The Church Fathers recognized that mothers, in many cases their own, play a decisive role in shaping the faith of the next generation, and they praised pious women who lived out this calling with perseverance and self-sacrifice. From biblical models such as Hannah and the Theotokos to their own contemporaries such as Saint Monica and Saint Emilia, the Fathers regarded mothers as spiritual pillars of the Church. Saint Monica of Hippo, who lived between the years 331 to 387 AD, is remembered as the mother of Saint Augustine and as one of the most famous examples of pious maternal figures that prevailed in life, or won the spiritual race, both for herself and for her loved ones. While most of what we know about her comes directly from her son Augustine's confessions, modern Orthodox, especially from the West, have taken an interest in the lessons drawn from her pious activities. This essay will focus on the Church Fathers' opinions on motherhood and then on Saint Monica's example of motherhood and what we can understand from her activities and holy life. If you want to listen directly to the part about Saint Monica, please check the timestamps. The Church Fathers consistently elevated motherhood beyond its natural role, presenting it as a form of cooperation with God's redemptive energies. Eve is the first mother, but the Virgin Mary, the Theotokos, became the prototype of motherhood directed towards God's plan of salvation. Where Eve failed, the Virgin Mary prevailed. In the Orthodox understanding, every mother participates in this mystery. She not only gives life, but she is also called to nurture her children in the life of Christ, just like how the Church does not only baptize people into her body, but also develops them within. Regarding mothers, St. John Chrysostom famously stated that the Church Fathers generally believed that the most powerful lessons in faith often come not from the bishop or priest, but from the mother, as they are their children's first catechist and represent the first contact with faith in God. The mothers are also their first and most loyal intercessors. As St. Augustine said about his mother, that it cannot be that the son of those tears should perish, referring to himself. Through the example of mothers, children gain a habit of piety and spiritual diligence. But not everything is sunshine and roses, as mothers experience plenty of sorrows in their lives and have to sacrifice many things in favor of others. There are numerous examples of Church Fathers who praised or wrote about the value of mothers and their providential role in raising future Christians. St. John Chrysostom wrote about women. A mother experiences more than one death, even though she herself will only die once. She fears for her husband. She fears for her children. Again, she fears for the women and children who belong to her children. For each of these, whether for loss of possessions, bodily illness, or undesired misfortune, she mourns and grieves no less than those who suffer. He also urged mothers to not raise their children into luxury and not spoil them, instead instilling virtue through motherly discipline. Saint Jerome praised his friend Saint Paula, a Roman widow, for teaching her daughter the Scriptures with her mother's milk. Saint Gregory of Nazianzus greatly honored his mother, Saint Nona, as the one who instilled in him the love of Christ from infancy. Saint Basil the Great attributed much of his family's piety to the love of God instilled by their grandmother, Macrina the Elder, and his mother, Emilia. Saint Gregory of Nyssa also talked about the power of mothers, mentioning his sister and mother as well. She, Macrina, shared her mother's toils, dividing her cares with her, and lightening her heavy load of sorrows. With her firm, unflinching spirit, she taught her mother's soul to be brave. He also mentioned that his sister, Saint Macrina, exercised a spiritual motherhood role over the siblings after the death of their father. Perhaps the most striking testimony comes from Saint Augustine, reflecting on his mother Monica. Thus hadst thou converted her mourning into joy, more plentiful than she had desired, and dearer and purer than she was wont to wish, by giving me unto her, converted unto thee. For thou, O Lord, hadst made her a woman strong in faith, and giving her a portion of her to serve her Lord. She travailed in birth of me, both in her flesh, that I might be born to the temporal light, and in her heart, that I might be born to the eternal light. Motherhood is thus a position naturally inclined to rely on God when praying for the well-being of families and for their salvation. Before being a pious and attentive mother, Saint Monica was first a faithful wife to her not-so-faithful pagan husband, Patricios, a Roman official from North Africa who had a violent temper and treated his spouse badly. Despite this situation, Saint Monica treated him with love and respect, acts which eventually persuaded her husband to reconsider his religious outlook, ending his life as a Christian. Her legendary endurance in the face of adversary, coming not from an enemy, but from a loved one within the family, was not an easy feat. Saint Monica bore her husband's misgivings with patience and humility, believing that eventually God will deliver both of them from evil. Saint Monica was raised in a deeply devoted family of ancient Berber Christians from North Africa. Despite this upbringing, her parents decided to marry her to a pagan Roman official, Patricios, who came from an old aristocratic family. They did not get along well together initially, as Patricios was constantly annoyed by her Christian behavior, prayers, almsgiving, and treating slaves nicely. Her situation was not unique at the time, since many Christian women found themselves married to pagan men who continually tried to perturb their spouses' inclination towards church and spiritual life. Saint Monica, although in a less than ideal situation, preserved with faith in God and in His mercy, believing that through her sacrifice she would be able to persuade God to open the hearts of her family and household. She bore her husband at least 3 children, 2 boys and 1 daughter, Saint Augustine being one of the boys. Unfortunately, her husband did not allow her to baptize the children, causing her a lot of grief. When asked by other wives why Patricios, despite being temperamental and unreasonable, never once hit Saint Monica, she would answer that instead of blaming the violent nature of their husbands, they should instead look within and seek meekness and love towards them. She has learned that it was best to not irritate her husband, not only verbally, but also in action. Eventually, Saint Monica's incessant prayers proved salvific for her husband first, as he accepted Christ and became a reformed man. Even though he would not live long after his baptism, this event gave a lot of hope to Saint Monica, who wished her son to come to Christ as well. Saint Monica is a great example for wives who are having a hard time with their spouses and need reassurance that the path of obedience, despite persecution, is a blessed one. As a mother, Saint Monica is famous for her tireless intercession for her son, young Augustine, who, in the beginning, was not interested in Christianity and lived a life of debauchery and partook in Gnostic mysteries. Saint Augustine himself recalls how his mother's tears followed him across continents until his eventual baptism by Saint Ambrose in Milano. Saint Augustine has always been an intellectually talented man and has pursued to expand his mental capabilities continuously. Due to his curiosity, he ended up in the Manichaean sect, an ancient Levantine sect that believed in dualism and that partook in mystical communion. After leaving the cult, St. Augustine became a Neoplatonist, which made him, ironically, more interested in Christianity as a result. Finally, Saint Augustine meets Saint Ambrose, the famous Archbishop of Milano, who eventually converts Augustine and officiates his baptism. Afterwards, while returning home, at the Roman port of Ostia, Saint Monica falls asleep into the Lord, having her dearest dream achieved, seeing her last child become a proper Christian. This story represents a great example that proves the efficacy and benefits of motherly intercession for their children. There's hardly a better pastoral encouragement for mothers to continue praying for their families than Saint Monica. But Saint Monica did not forget her other children, as her other son, Navigius, lived a Christian life, married and had children. He was also present with his mother and brother at Ostia. Her daughter, Perpetua, likewise pursued Christian virtues and eventually became the leader of a nunnery in Hippo, founded by Saint Augustine in the city which he was shepherding as a bishop. Saint Augustine's former concubine returned to Africa and vowed to not know another man, while his son, young Adeodatus, dies as a teenager not too long after his baptism, and was grieved greatly by the family. The great Saint Augustine writes in Confessions that his mother shed more tears for him than other mothers did for deceased children. Through her unending spiritual hardship, and by simply refusing to give up on her son, God revealed his grace on Augustine and redirected his life towards himself. Her pain to have me reborn by the Spirit was greater than the one that gave physical birth to him. There are few greater mothers in the history of the Church than Saint Monica. On her icon, Saint Monica's scroll reveals the following words: "I cried to the Lord in my distress, and he answered me." Her life is a great example for us that serves to strive to be better mothers and to appreciate mothers for all their efforts, their sacrifices, pain, suffering, and prayers that they selflessly give to their children, husbands, and family. The road to sainthood is difficult, but possible, and it begins with honoring our mothers.